Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bill O'Donnell, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs at BioNJ. And on behalf of our President, Debbie Hart, our Director of Business Development, Kathleen Otto, and the entire BioNJ team, I want to thank everyone for taking time from your busy day to participate in BioNJ's first manufacturing webinar, The State of Manufacturing, Policy Changes, Tax Credits, and Government Incentives for Manufacturing. Let me start off by saying we are very grateful to the Manufacturing Committee for helping develop this timely topic, which is obviously taking on more relevance as the presidential elections begin to heat up. And of course, a special note of thanks to our sponsors, McGladrey and UPS. A little bit of housekeeping here to ensure that we provide everyone with the ability to participate. I want to go over some of the logistics of the call. First, this will be a listen-only call, but we are certainly eager to receive your questions. So the slides will be streamlined via GoToWebinar, and you can submit your questions via the box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. We will try at the end of the presentations to get in as many of your questions as possible. Just for a note, I would note that the webinar is being recorded for later replay on the BioNJ website, and that is www.bionj.org. So, in the interest of time and your valuable time, let's get right to our speakers. We are very lucky to have with us Richard Pena of UPS to serve as our moderator, and he is joined by two experts who are uniquely qualified to look at this issue from both a national perspective and then a deeper dive into what New Jersey has to offer. So our other speakers are Mr. Tom Windrum, who joins us from the McGladrey office in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Tom. And Mr. Lauren Moore of the New Jersey Business Action Center located right here in Trenton. Thank you, Lauren. And Lauren is being joined by Matthew Abraham of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, or EDA. Just some quick information about our speakers here today. Our moderator, Richard Pena, serves as the manager of the U.S. Healthcare Logistics and Marketing at UPS. Richard has more than 24 years of experience in the logistics industry. That's a commercial, I think, logistics, isn't it, Richard? It was. Since joining UPS in 1998, Richard has held many roles across a variety of disciplines, including finance and cost accounting, customer service, information systems, operations, and healthcare marketing, specializing in process analytics, implementation, and system developments to an international market. In his current role, Richard leads UPS's healthcare logistics brand, positioning to the middle market in New Jersey. Additionally, he oversees client development across the supply chain. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in finance from California State Polytechnic University and an MBA from the Johnson School at Cornell University. Welcome, Richard. Our first speaker, Tom Windrum, is a partner in the Washington National Tax Office of McGladrey. Tom is the national leader for the federal tax credits and incentives practice, which includes the following services: research tax credits, cost segregation, energy incentives, domestic production activities deduction. Tom is also responsible for monitoring and communicating tax legislative developments. Tom often gets involved in the largest tax credit projects for key clients, and prior to his role at McGladrey, Tom led the accounting for income tax practice and the technology implementations. He is the author of several articles on research tax credit and renewable tax incentives, and has been published or quoted in several industry publications. Tom also provided testimony that contributed to the Government Accountability Office report on the design and administration of the research tax credit. Prior to joining McGladrey, Tom spent 8 years at Deloitte, where he was the National Software Research Tax Credit Practice. Before that, Tom was at KPMG for 3 years, where he specialized in accounting for income taxes and corporate tax. Tom has a BS in accounting from Indiana University of Pennsylvania and a master's in taxation from Robert Morris College. Our New Jersey colleague, Lauren Moore, is the Director of Business Advocacy for the New Jersey Business Action Center. In this capacity, he oversees the diverse responsibilities of his unit, which includes business retention, expansion and attraction services, coordination of state, local, and federal business assistance and incentive programs and grants, project coordination between state, county, and local government entities and the private sector, site selection assistance, assistance with technical, regulatory, and permit compliance issues, and resolution of business complaints. Lauren has a bachelor's degree in environmental science from the Richard Stockton College and is a licensed New Jersey professional planner and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. As I said, he is joined by Matthew Abraham. Matthew Abraham is a Senior Business Development Officer for the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. In his position, he works with urban targeted municipalities and developers on projects that would benefit the ERG grant and urban transit hub tax credit programs. He also works with not-for-profits and community development 501c3 organizations on tax-exempt bond transactions. Prior to joining EDA, Matthew worked for the Washington Mutual Bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, where he held various positions including business development specialist, regional business banking representative, and branch manager. Mr. Abraham has also worked on Wall Street with an international derivatives and financial risk and web-based solutions company, providing software and consulting services to many complex hedging accounting standards worldwide for major corporations in commodities, energies, interest rate, credit, and foreign exchange derivatives. Mr. Abraham attained his Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and Marketing from Dominican College. And with that, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And I turn the program over to our moderator, Mr. Pena. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you all to those that are attending. In my role in client development, I've had the opportunity of talking with many business leaders across segments across New Jersey. And they most commonly voice their concern and uncertainty about the business climate and where negative impacts to margins abound at every turn. So it is our hope that you absorb what is being said here, for these are very large topics that we're going to introduce, and that you begin to understand the impact of these topics to your business, your market, and your customers. And you seek more information from firms such like McGladrey or New Jersey Business Action Center. So I wish to applaud BioNJ for their advocacy and outreach of the business community in New Jersey with programs such as this one and the recent webinar on the impact of the Supreme Court ruling on the Affordable Care Act, which, by the way, is recorded and on BioNJ.org. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen, please do. There's some good information there. Moving forward, the Manufacturers Committee is also in the middle of planning a Manufacturers Summit on September 20th, so please look out for more information on that. So let's get right to our content. The organization of the call is actually quite simple. Tom will first take us through a macro federal view on manufacturing. Lauren, with the aid of Matthew, will then review what programs are available through the Business Action Center and one of their partners, the Economic Development Authority. And then we're going to reserve some time at the end to answer some questions. So Tom, if you will.
Thank you, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about manufacturing policy, tax credits, and government incentives from a federal government perspective. Next slide, please. And I'm going to start off by just covering the current legislative environment. Next slide. What we have here is a perfect storm. There are many problems that are interrelated, and we can't solve any one of these in isolation without making other problems worse, starting with our continuing sluggish economy, We have very high unemployment still, and as we all know, job creation is a very high priority, particularly in manufacturing. We have large budget deficits, and with those deficits, there's resistance to further government stimulus to spur job growth. So that's not where the jobs are going to come from. In addition, we've got the fiscal cliff, which resulted from a deal that was made last year in order to avoid a problem and raising the debt ceiling. So they raised the debt ceiling, and Democrats and Republicans struck a deal to, if they could not cut a certain amount from the budget by a certain date, that we would go into this process where there would be across-the-board cuts, pretty deep cuts, including substantial cuts in defense. So now what we're looking at is this fiscal cliff is looming, and so we're going to have cuts in defense and other government programs, which will in turn exacerbate the unemployment problem that we have. In addition, we've got expiration of the Bush tax cuts, and again, there's different policy considerations from the left and from the right on which of those cuts should continue. And so that's going to have a substantial impact on the owners of small businesses, which are largely flow-through entities, and that could further limit job growth. In addition, we have the Affordable Care Act provisions, many of which will be taking effect in 2013, including a 3% Medicare surtax on high-income individuals, and the medical device excise tax, which obviously has a big effect on biotechnology, and I could easily spend 2 hours just talking about that, among other changes in the Affordable Care Act. And then finally, we have the election year. And so in an election year, typically what you have is a lot of talk about these problems, but little real action until after the election. Next slide. So from that, I want to move into the current state of manufacturing tax incentives. We can't talk about the future or about tax reform without first reviewing where we are. Starting with, next slide, we have a joint committee on taxation report, and that's really the source of my discussion points here, and it was very timely given that we had Ways and Means Committee hearings on Thursday, July 19th, where several corporate leaders gave their views on tax issues facing manufacturing businesses. And so as part of preparing for those hearings, the Joint Committee prepared a 121-page report on tax reform in the U.S. manufacturing sector. In the interest of time, I'm not going to explain all of these different incentives, but hopefully you're somewhat familiar with them. Starting with incentives for capital investment, we have accelerated depreciation, which is currently under the modified accelerated cost recovery system we're makers. We have bonus depreciation, which for a period of time was actually 100% write-off of new equipment purchases. It's now back to 50% through the end of 2012. The fate of bonus depreciation is really uncertain after that, depending on what Congress does. We also have various expensing provisions under Section 179. Those levels have moved up or down over time, and right now it's at $125,000, but if nothing else changes, it's going to drop to $25,000 in 2013. We had, for a brief period, as part of the 2009 Stimulus Act, what was known as the Advanced Energy Property Manufacturing Credit, which was an energy incentive that was focused on manufacturers of equipment that goes into renewable energy projects. So companies that make solar panels or wind turbines and things like that were eligible for a 30% credit. But it was a one-time application period. It was $2.3 billion, and it was first come, first served. Once it was used up, it was gone. Program was way oversubscribed. There were many, many applicants that were eligible that got no money from this program. There have been attempts to revise it, but again, because of the significant budget deficit, those proposals have really gone nowhere. We still have a couple of different energy investment tax credits that are available. And I mentioned a couple of these real estate credits, low-income housing credit and historic building rehabilitation credit, which benefit the real estate industry, but indirectly benefit manufacturers as well when you talk about manufacturers of building materials. Okay, next slide. In addition, the Joint Committee report spent some time discussing other significant incentives for manufacturers, including the research and development incentives. There's a deduction for research expenses under Section 174 of the Internal Revenue Code, where businesses can get a deduction for R&D costs, which might otherwise have to be capitalized under other portions of the tax law. And then we have the research tax credit, which is the official title is the credit for increasing research activities, which nobody really calls it that. It's widely known as the R&D tax credit, which is a formula. It's a 20% credit on incremental growth in R&D activities. So because it's based on incremental growth and the way the formula works, it's effectively limited to a net benefit of around 6.5% of your current year R&D costs that are qualified under the tax code. Companies whose primary activity is manufacturing actually account for 43% of the companies that are claiming the research tax credit, but they actually claim about 69% of the dollar amount of the credits. So it is very heavily relied upon by manufacturers to incentivize their research activities. And finally, we have the domestic production activities deduction, which has been around since 2005, and it's also based on a complex formula. Essentially, the credit, it's actually a special deduction in 9%, but it's has the effect of lowering the marginal tax rate on qualified production activity income from 35% to just under 32%. So the real impact is about 3 percentage points on the tax rate. Okay, next slide. So that leads into, we heard many criticisms at the Ways and Means Committee hearings, and we've heard similar themes over the past several years as politicians debate tax and economic policy. There's been many recurring criticisms of current U.S. manufacturing tax policy when compared to tax policies of some of the other major countries of the world. Next slide. Starting with the common criticism that you hear, and this has gotten a lot of press lately as discussions around tax reform have been going on for the past year or so, and that is that the U.S. corporate tax rate is too high. The average federal and state combined rate is actually 39.5%, which happens to be tied with Japan for the highest rate among OECD countries. And the OECD is an acronym that stands for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is many of the large industrial countries of the world. So it's definitely a significant and important benchmark for the U.S. to be concerned about. The effective marginal tax rate in the U.S. is 23.6%, which, although not the highest because there's a lot of credits and incentives in the U.S. tax system, it is still higher than the OECD average. And now, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that many businesses in the U.S. are organized as flow-through entities. either S corporations or partnerships. And so McGladrey, among others, has advocated to the government that, hey, we don't want to just focus on the corporate rate. We need to look at the individual rates for business owners that receive the bulk of their earnings as flow-throughs from their S corps or partnerships. And so there's similar issues there, and there have been similar proposals to lower the tax rate on flow-through income where there's active participation. So we have all these tax credits and incentives, but some of the major criticisms related to that is that startup companies or companies that are in tax loss positions receive no benefit from these incentives because there's limitations in the tax code, and so they cannot use these incentives until they become profitable and use their other carry-forwards. Plus, there's many, many tax credits, and so there's an ordering. So until they use their tax losses, they can't start using credits. On top of that, you have alternative minimum tax, which is not indexed for inflation, so it's crept into the middle class, and it negates incentives for many, many taxpayers. Next slide. Continuing on, we also have a very complex U.S. international tax regime, which has been criticized as harming competitiveness of U.S. businesses in the global markets. The U.S. tax system, unlike a lot of other countries, starts by taxing worldwide income and then has a foreign tax credit and some other provisions. But the effect is that a lot of money that's earned by subsidiaries of U.S. corporations is parked overseas, and there's a significant tax cost to bringing that money back into the U.S., and so it stays abroad. And then finally, we have a criticism because of the nature of a lot of these credit and incentive provisions are temporary in nature and have to be renewed every year or every 2 years or have some expiration at some point, that it creates a lot of uncertainty, and it makes it very difficult for businesses to plan because they don't know whether they can rely on these incentives. A prime example of this is the research credit, which has been extended 15 times since it was first enacted in 1981. And it's becoming more and more difficult every year to pass extenders legislation because Congress is running out of ways to pay for it. And effectively, the way it works in Congress with the pay-go provisions is you can't really enact any sort of tax reduction in terms of extending credits or other incentives without finding a tax increase somewhere else. And so most of the increases that have been proposed, which are to the detriment of one industry group or another, get a lot of criticism, get a lot of lobbying to stop those increases. And so without those increases, they can't pay for the extenders. And so that makes it a real fire drill at the end of every legislative session to get these extenders passed. So in addition to the research credit, another one is bonus depreciation, which has had several different iterations and is currently at 50%. But again, it's going to go away after the end of this year. The expensing limits that we talked about earlier, and there are a number of energy incentives which have either just expired or are scheduled to expire at the end of this year. Most significantly is the production tax credit for wind farms. And so obviously the wind industry is very concerned about that because if that expires, it would result in a substantial number of jobs having to be eliminated. Okay, next slide. So where that leaves us is because of the makeup of the current U.S. tax system and a number of the incentives that are built into the system coupled with high rates and the criticism of the current state of affairs, we have a number of tax reform proposals. So I want to talk about some of those. Starting with the most common proposal you hear about, and this really echoes back to the Tax Reform Act of '86 under the Reagan administration. If you remember, at that time, we lowered the corporate tax rate, and there were actually a number of tax incentives that were eliminated at that time in order to broaden the base. And over time, a lot of those incentives crept back in. So now we kind of find, and the rates have gone back up. So we find ourselves in the same position that we were in 1986. And so a couple of the proposals that are out there is we have Representative David Camp, who's the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, has proposed a reduction of the corporate tax rate to 25%. The Obama administration also has a proposal on the table to lower the corporate tax rate to 28%. Part of the challenge with that is that, as you can see, eliminating all of the corporate tax breaks that currently exist would still not cover the revenue that's lost from lowering the rate to 25%. So again, lowering the rate is a goal in order to make the U.S. more competitive, but it would have the effect of substantially increasing the deficit. So that's kind of the challenge, and figuring out, and a lot of economists are looking at this, trying to figure out what's the right combination of low rate and benefits, because they're certainly not going to eliminate all tax benefits. There are certain ones that are pretty key to driving certain economic activities. So another one of the challenges is broadening the base creates industry winners and losers. So then it becomes a question of whose ox gets gored, and every industry has lobbyists that are trying to stop them from being the ones that have to, in a sense, pay for having the rate lowered on everyone. The other big question, which I think there can only be one answer to, and that is if rates are lowered on corporations, then you have to look at individual rates, at least with respect to active income from flow-through entities. So even if the Bush tax cuts are allowed to expire and rates go back up, if they lower the rates on corporate income, then there's going to be a pretty strong push to lower rates, individual rates on flow-through income. And then, as we talked about, we've got the revenue question, and how do you balance lowering corporate tax rates with deficit reduction? Next slide. Some other proposals that have been put forth, and a big one is a change to what's known as a territorial international tax system. So going away from the U.S. system of taxing worldwide income and then having all these other complex regimes like the foreign tax credit and subpart F income and all these kinds of things. The big problem here is transition issues, because what we've got right now is we've got a lot of unrepatriated earnings of foreign subsidiaries. And so what happens if we change to a territorial system? Can the government afford to grant a holiday so that that money can be repatriated tax-free, or maybe at a reduced rate? Or do they end up having to tax that pre-conversion earnings? And then how is that done? Is it phased in over a period of years? There's just a lot of questions there. And then the other issue is you have unused foreign tax credits, and what do you do with those? Another proposal that we've seen coming out of the Obama administration is the so-called Buffett rule, where income, say, over $1 million is taxed at a higher rate. to kind of, balance out the fact that you've got all this passive income like capital gains and dividends, which, obviously rich people earn more of. And so you have the Democrats saying, well, gee, it's not fair that they're only paying 15% on that. And, working stiffs are paying, up to, 30-some% on their income. So that resulted in the Buffett rule. Problem is we have the AMT, which has crept into the minimum tax. So the administration was trying to do a swap between the Buffett rule and the AMT. Problem is the AMT brings in so much revenue that even enacting the Buffett rule wasn't going to cover the amount of revenue that would be lost if they eliminate the AMT. So eliminating the AMT, everybody wants to eliminate the AMT. Even Democrats agree it's just a bad tax. But nobody could figure out how to do it and make up that loss in revenue without really putting an even bigger hole in the deficit. So it's a major challenge. Another thing that's been proposed many, many times, but it's really starting to get some traction, is to make the research credit permanent. This is a big deal from a U.S. competitiveness standpoint, because many other countries have a more generous credit than the U.S., and it's permanent. So in other countries, they don't have the same level of uncertainty that U.S. businesses have in whether they're getting any government incentive for their R&D activities. And then what we've got then is challenges with all the above. And it always comes down to how are these various tax expenditures paid for. So I would just say stay tuned. The next several months are going to be very, very interesting, regardless of which side is victorious in the election. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting time to see how this all plays out, and especially for manufacturers. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Tom. Lauren?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. The first thing I'd like to do in my presentation this afternoon is provide the audience an overview of Governor Christie, Lieutenant Guadagno's approach to business development. I think it's important to know the direction that we're going in and our approach. I will talk about our specific programs and services, but I want to give an overview of our approach. What you'll see on the slides here is the Partnership for Action. The Partnership for Action consists of 3 components.
Can everyone hear okay on the line?
Yes, better now.
Sure. Apologies. The Partnership for Action consists of 3 approaches, three organizations: Choose New Jersey, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Choose New Jersey is our marketing arm. Choose New Jersey is designed to get the word out about New Jersey as a business destination. Choose New Jersey is headed up by Tracy McDaniel. Many of you may have crossed paths with her already. Choose is being very aggressive in their outreach to markets outside of New Jersey. Their primary focus is to generate leads and attention on New Jersey's business environment. And we're going to talk about some of the improvements to New Jersey's business environment. The other component in the partnership is the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. And as you heard earlier on the line is Matthew Abraham from EDA. I previously worked at the Economic Development Authority before coming to work for the Lieutenant Governor in the Business Action Center. EDA, I guess, it's not fair to describe them in a phrase, but the Economic Development Authority is New Jersey's bank for business. New Jersey EDA is where a majority of our incentive and financing programs are housed. We work very, very closely with our colleagues in EDA to make sure that the business community connects with the programs and the resources that are available for their project. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about how we do that, so there's a clear picture for our audience. And then the other piece of the partnership is where I work in the New Jersey Business Action Center. The New Jersey Business Action Center is our one-stop shop for businesses in New Jersey. Our primary function for the administration is to create, retain, and expand jobs in New Jersey. And we take our approach to that is we listen very closely to what a company, a business is trying to accomplish. We understand the company's project scope, whether it's an expansion or it's a company looking to come into New Jersey. Once we understand that company's project scope, we match the over 40 or 50 different programs to that project scope. And we do that in a very clear and concise way, and we do it in writing. One of our primary products in our shop is to provide a formal written proposal of the programs and the resources and the incentives that the state of New Jersey can bring to bear for that company's project. We make clear, sharp, crisp estimates with those incentives and resources, and then we handhold through the whole application process. We do this arm in arm with our colleagues at EDA, our colleagues at the Department of Labor, and I'll talk more about their programs. So we just don't identify programs and incentives. We help with the entire process. We take a comprehensive account management approach to assisting New Jersey's business community. And we make lifelong, business-long relationships with our customers. We take that very, very seriously, and I will say that my team and I, once we come and meet with a company, we are available 24/7. And we are very responsive to the needs of the business community. And I'll also add that the Lieutenant Governor frequently calls the companies we're working with and visits the companies we're working with. So once we develop a relationship, we make recommendations for her direct involvement with the company. And she has been out there, and if any of you have heard her speak, she gives out her cell phone number. So if anything happens or anything comes up, you can call her directly. And of course, that's always on our mind when we're working with companies, that make sure our companies are happy and our customers are happy so they get positive calls to the Lieutenant Governor. One of the things, too, I want to mention with this administration, and I've had the pleasure of working for 6 different administrations in Trenton, and I think it's important to note that you hear about the job creation and you read it in the newspaper in New Jersey, that some of the things that this administration has done to make New Jersey a more tax-friendly, competitive state is that we've gone to a single sales factor with our corporate business tax. So we reduced the corporate business tax burden on companies in New Jersey. We signed a 2% property tax for companies that make a decision to do business in New Jersey to bring predictability to the tax load here. And we've also, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, have increased the R&D tax credit. In the past, and I know the audience on the phone is familiar with this, in the past the R&D tax credit, you can only use your R&D tax credit to cover up to 50% of your tax liability in New Jersey. You can now use R&D tax credits to cover 100% of your tax liability, an important change for this industry and this audience. One of the other things, too, I want to mention that's important, that's under the Lieutenant Governor's office, is the Red Tape Commission. And this administration, again, takes this very seriously, that if there are any issues, any regulatory issues, anything that we can do to make life easier for New Jersey's corporations, We are all ears to hear that. The Red Tape Commission has made tweaks and adjustments to rules and regulations, as long as we're not compromising environmental quality. We are very interested to hear recommendations of what we can do to make reporting, paperwork, and other things easier for the companies to do business in New Jersey. In our one-stop shop on the slide that you're looking at now, one of the other things that's important to note is that we work very closely with all the counties and municipalities in the state of New Jersey. We maintain a comprehensive real estate database so that companies that are looking to come into New Jersey or expand, we're able to find sites that work to meet your business needs. And in the next bullet, you'll see we talk about permitting and regulatory issues. This is our advocacy services. We have, and I have, direct contacts in every state commissioner's offices of every major department in the state of New Jersey. We work very closely with the DEP, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Community Affairs, New Jersey Transit, trying to extend bus routes to help get employees to businesses. We work directly on those issues. So sometimes the help that you need might not be financial, it might not be a loan or an incentive, but it might be help navigating the rules and regulations in New Jersey. And we always say sometimes if we can't give you money, we can give you time by bringing predictability and a schedule with your regulatory needs in New Jersey. We take that very seriously, and we actually have a lot of great success in case studies of successful permitting and regulatory issues with companies that we've helped throughout New Jersey. The last thing on this slide that I want to mention, because a lot of the biotech companies that we work with are international companies. We have a full complement in the Lieutenant Governor's Business Action Center of an international trade office. We help with companies for foreign direct investment, international companies that are looking to expand in New Jersey. We have a full service of foreign correspondence at our international desk. And we also help with importing and exporting issues with state, federal, and local governments. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. My colleague, Matt Abraham, is there anything, Matt, that you want to add to that before I go to the next slide?
No, that other than that we do also partner with the federal government on the import and export side as well. So I think we bring a full resource on a state level as well as a federal level.
And it appears I got a little ahead of myself because on our next slide we talk about our international trade services here with trade consulting, foreign direct investment, and overseas trade offices. We work closely with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, and we work through their international desks as well. So we have global reach here in the state of New Jersey. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the resources and the programs that we have here in New Jersey. And as I look down the list of the audience that has joined the program, there are several that have used and taken advantage of our programs. The Business Employment Incentive Program, you may have heard this referred to the BEEP program. I usually say this is cash grants to create jobs. When I say cash grants to create jobs, it gets people's attention. When I talk about BEEP grants, they're like, what's that? This is cash grants to create jobs. And for this industry, to create jobs in New Jersey, you have to create a minimum of 10 positions to be eligible for this program. Here, the program is funded by rebating back a portion of the income tax, the state income tax withholdings off the newly created positions. And it could be up to 80% of the income tax withholdings off of those positions. Excuse me. I do want to point out that this program has a material factor requirement. So if a company has organic growth in jobs, we're not going to incent those jobs because you were going to create those anyway. The material factor test on this is that but for this grant, these jobs would have been created in another state. So you'll need to prove in your application to the Economic Development Authority who administers this program that without this grant you would have created these jobs in, say, Pennsylvania or New York. So it's not an organic growth incentive. So I want to be clear about that. And my contact information will be at the end because I imagine there'll be some questions on this. And I'm glad to talk with anyone downstream that can call me directly on this. But we're able, if we understand the project scope, we're able to give a clear, crisp, accurate value to the number of jobs. Once we know the annual salaries on those jobs, we're able to tell you what the value of that incentive would be. The Business Retention and Relocation Assistance Grant Program, again, several of the members of the audience have used this program. New Jersey is one of the few states that has a program to retain jobs. For the longest time, New Jersey jobs were getting poached. And we have a program now to help keep the legacy employers that have jobs in New Jersey. We're able to incent the retention of those positions in New Jersey through this program. This program can provide a tax credit of up to $2,250 per job, and it could be as much as over a 6-year term depending on the number of eligible retained jobs. It's a tax credit, and it's a tax credit that you can monetize. If you can't use it, you can sell it and turn it into cash. And this program also has a material factor requirement that, but for this incentive, these jobs would have been relocated to another state. And I also want to add, the program has a requirement that the company has to have been in operation in New Jersey for at least a 10-year period. The Clean Energy Manufacturing Fund, I slipped this in here. This is more of a high-tech, not a biotech manufacturing program. It's for Class A clean energy manufacturers. I'm not going to talk much about this unless we get a question on this. I'm going to move on to the clean energy programs that are administered through our Board of Public Utilities. The Board of these programs are very popular. These are our green energy programs. And there's a suite of programs. If I had a drop down here, there are about 3 programs under this that, depending on what the company wants to accomplish, they can access to help them green their business, where they could install energy efficiency lighting, where they can install chillers and heaters and HVAC and get rebates and grants through the BPU to help offset the installation of that high energy efficiency programs. Okay, I'm going to move on and keep moving here. Customized training grants. This is an important one for this industry because I also want to point out here, workforce training grants. New Jersey's highly educated workforce. This is why a lot of biotech companies are here. We can give you grants to help keep your workforce trained, highly efficient, and competitive. The other thing that's important to note in this business industry with biotech is finding qualified employees for your company. Through the Department of Labor, we have a positive recruitment program. We can help match up with your needs. Once we understand the needs of your recruitment, we can match and resume match, no cost, free service through our Department of Labor. And I'm glad to set up appointments with our Department of Labor friends to come out and meet with you to understand how this can supplement what your HR department is doing and what your needs are. It's a great program through the Department of Labor, and if you're not using them, you should be. Manufacturing equipment investment. We have tax credits for the manufacturing equipment that you bring into your facility and you put online. We can do the calculations and help you understand the values of these tax credits. What's important to note here, you have to be a C Corp. And a lot of biotech companies are LLCs, and this program does not work for an LLC. New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Program. They come in and do an overall audit of your entire manufacturing process to make sure it is as efficient and tight and cost-effective as it can be. We can give you more information on that as well. The Technology Business Tax Credit Transfer Program. We call this our net operating loss program. A lot of companies operate, and biotech companies are able to sell their losses to profitable companies. The applications are due by the end of June. EDA just went through the application cycle. There's a lot to talk about in this, but I'm on a limited time schedule here, and we can get back to it if there's questions. Urban Enterprise Zone, areas where you can get a lot of tax-free incentives if you locate in one of our 37 zones across the state of New Jersey. Manufacturers have access, moving on to the next slide, tax-exempt bonds, where we can give you great rates, low-interest money to qualified companies. This is a great program for manufacturers. There's a specific carve-out for manufacturers under this program. My colleagues at EDA administer that and can speak more to that. Loan participations through EDA. Our colleagues at EDA can do direct participations for companies that work with a list of banks that my colleagues at EDA work on. Loan guarantees. These are programs that can help bring down your cost of money, as well as direct loans. Okay, the last slide here is we have a call center. It's a toll-free number where you can reach me through this toll-free number. This line operates from 8 to 6 every day, Monday through Friday.
Lauren, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Tom, thank you. A lot of great information there. Let's jump to some questions. Lauren, what are the New Jersey incentives that companies should be more aware of? Anything that you see is underused?
I'm kind of thinking that through. I would say it's our business advocacy services. Companies that come to us frequently are experiencing trouble with approvals at the municipal level when they're doing an expansion. Getting building code inspections to come out when we have a biotech manufacturer that's expanding their space and they have the space done and they're waiting 2 weeks for a building code inspector to come out and inspect the improvements so they can go in, get their certificate of occupancy, and start working. That is something that most of where companies look to us is for financing, incentives, and money. But our regulatory assistance is often overlooked, and this is where we can really help. And when you're doing a project, meeting early and often with your municipalities so they understand the project, we can facilitate those relationships. My team and I have excellent working relationships with the counties and the municipalities. I'm a county guy. I worked for 2 counties. Before I came to the state, we understand how the locals think and work, and we can help with that.
Excellent. Tom, I believe Lauren spoke to this a bit, but can you speak to what the government is doing to address the correlation between innovation and manufacturing? And as a follow-up, what is the likelihood of research credit becoming permanent, and will this decision be affected by a change in the White House?
Okay, well, that was a multi-part question. Let me start with the first one. There's definitely some activity going on with respect to innovation in manufacturing. There was recently a report that the White House put out regarding innovation, and there are a number of proposals in there. The research credit obviously is a big component of spurring innovation, and I think the prospects for making it permanent are, as good as they've ever been. There just continues to be more and more of a strong push in that direction. What's interesting is the research credit is actually one of the very few incentive programs in the tax code that has bipartisan support, generally speaking. There's strong proponents for the research credit from both the Republican and the Democrat side. What often gets in the way, as I mentioned before, is how to pay for extension of the credit, but that's definitely a very key component of all of the tax reform discussions. Unfortunately, one of the things that has hurt the momentum for that is there have been several Fortune 500 company CEOs that have come out and said, we would be willing to give up the research credit entirely if you lower our corporate tax rate. And I think part of that is coming from the fact that the research credit has been made more difficult to obtain because of some hardline positions that have been taken by the IRS in examinations. And that's also being addressed. We're starting to see some more reasonableness there, at least coming from IRS National Office. We're still waiting for it to filter down to the field. But they realize that they've gone too far, and it's really, first of all, tied up a lot of IRS resources. And secondly, it's really, taken away a lot of the incentive effect of the credit. A lot of companies have said, look, I'm just not going to bother trying to get the research credit anymore because the last audit I went through was so brutal. So that's a huge problem that's got to be fixed. But clearly, for the U.S. to remain competitive and not see all of our high-paying R&D jobs shipped offshore, they've got to do something to extend the research credit, make it permanent, and strengthen it. I'm involved with the R&D Coalition and the National Association of Manufacturers, and that is like our sole mission. That's all we've been trying to do for the past several years is lobby to make the research credit permanent and make it stronger. And the last part of the question, I don't think it will matter who gets in the White House in terms of what happens with the research credit. I think both President Obama and Mitt Romney support a permanent extension of the research credit.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
The manufacturer's equipment investment, are any of these retroactive? This comes from a company that recently made a big investment and was unaware of these incentives.
Yes, they are. So that's a good question, and thank you for whoever sent that question in. That is a by right tax credit. It's Form 305, and if we know who the company is, I'm glad to work with them and do direct outreach to them to make sure we connect them with the right form on taxation's website. And the way that that program works is if you purchase in the tax year, the tax period, which is the tax year, you purchase qualified manufacturing equipment. If you have 50 or less employees, you're entitled to 4% of the value of that equipment as a tax credit against your corporate business tax liability. If you have 51 or more, it's a 2% tax credit of the value of the qualified manufacturing equipment. Qualified manufacturing equipment, it's a long tax definition, but basically if it's directly involved in the manufacturing process, it's qualified manufacturing equipment. And this was the other one that was on my mind earlier. This one is missed more than not, more frequently than I expected by company. So I'm glad to work with whatever the company is that's asking that question. And it is retro, so if you buy it in that tax year, you file that form and you staple it to your tax return, and you're able to get that tax credit. And I'm going to give my contact information so whomever was asking the question can reach out to me. It's Lauren Moore, and I can be reached at 609-292-3863. And my cell phone is 609-954-4077. And my email, which is long, stick with me, is lauren.moore@sos.state.nj.us.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. We have time for one more question. According to Bloomberg, and this is directed towards you, Tom.
Okay.
According to Bloomberg, the U.S. lost 34% of its manufacturing jobs from 2000 to 2009. Employment in manufacturing has risen only 4% since. What are the growth predictions if, as, and when the recent Joint Committee incentives are implemented?
Is that a Lauren or a Tom question?
Tom question. Could you repeat the last part of the question?
Absolutely. What are the growth predictions if and when the recent Joint Committee incentives are implemented?
I'm not sure what they mean by the recent Joint Committee incentives. If they're talking about proposed incentives, then I don't know. I would have to research that and get back to you.
I'd like to add to that, though, and thank you again who asked the question. A part of the Business Action Center is our Planning Advocacy Unit. We're redoing the state master plan. It's going to be called the State Strategic Plan. It's going to be job growth focused. One of our targeted industries there is manufacturing. So New Jersey recognizes the importance of manufacturing and the creation of wealth. Manufacturing creates wealth. It doesn't transfer it. We recognize that, and we are going to do the best we can to aggressively incent and attract manufacturing in the state of New Jersey. This is top of mind for this administration, and such that we are making this one of our targeted industries in New Jersey. And I'm excited about this, and I hope you can hear it in my voice, because I am a huge, huge fan of manufacturing. I come from a whole family of manufacturers, and I see how it creates wealth, and we're going to do everything we can to stop the loss of manufacturing jobs in New Jersey.
Tom and Lauren, thank you very much. Bill?
Thank you, Richard. So I don't know how we can say as many thank yous as we need to say right now. This was a fantastic meeting. We went over time because of the interest in the topic. So I'd like to just end this all by thanking our participants, Tom Windrum, Lauren Moore, backed up by Matthew Abraham, and of course our moderator, Richard Pena. I'd like to thank our sponsors, McGladrey and UPS. I'd also like to make a special note for our Diamond members who are behind BioNJ at all times. I'll remind everyone that there will be a replay of this webinar on our website, www.bionj.org. Also, please be on the lookout for information on the Manufacturing Summit that will be held later this year. And as always, with everything we do with BioNJ, we look for your feedback. We look for your interest. Please let us know what you thought about this seminar. Let us know how we can improve it. And please let us know what other things we can do to serve you better, our members and the biotechnology community. It is an honor to serve you. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.